Stretching is when a muscle is made to go longer or wider without tearing it, or making it or straightening it to its full length, but without straining it or tearing it. So then why do we need to stretch? Hi, this is Fabi and welcome to 5 Minutes with Lafabe. So today we're talking about stretching. Let's talk about why we need to stretch. But before we get into it, let's find out the types or the techniques, the basic techniques or the basic types of stretching. So we basically have three, that is static, dynamic, and ballistic. During static stretching, a position is held between 30 to 60 seconds without moving because you're trying to stretch the muscle itself and all the connective tissues, the tendon and everything. But this one is not supposed to be used before physical activity because it decreases instead of increasing the performance during the activity, whether it's a sporting activity or it's just an exercise activity. Using static stretching before a physical activity actually inhibits the rate at which the muscle fires up, or it doesn't fire up as properly as it is supposed to. So there's a relationship that we call a length tension relationship in the muscles. You see that between the muscle fibers, if it is stretched too much, the ability at which it responds to being activated or being excited reduces, and it does affect the muscle's ability to function properly. For example, I have a rubber band right here, yeah? So if I stretch this too far for too long and keep it there, you'll notice that it will become longer, but the strength in it will be reduced because the energy that is stored in it is reduced. So the only reason why this is a rubber band and it's able to go back and come out is because of the tension in it. So if it loses that tension in it, it means it can't work as properly as it is supposed to provide that resistance and all of that. It's the same with our bodies. If with our bodies and our muscles. So if you overstretch or you do static stretching before doing a physical activity, your muscle becomes the elasticity or the excitability does reduce at a great rate. And of course, it does affect our performance, especially for athletes. The second one is dynamic stretching. This is the most common one that we like using. So this is a form of active stretching that is performed by engaging the desired muscles, only holding it for 2 to 3 seconds. So in dynamic stretching, the muscle is able to increase in length, but without reducing its muscle tension and its muscle elasticity or excitability, which is why it's the best type of stretching before starting an activity. And the third one is ballistic stretching. So this one is the most controversial because of how it's done. It does utilize muscle activation through quick jerking movements, but because of that extra external force, the muscles can become overloaded, and this can increase the risk at which the muscle can have an injury or can sustain an injury. So because of the risk of injury that it has, it is usually avoided. So those are the three major types of stretching. Of course, there's so many under them, but those are the three major types of stretching. So then what happens if we don't stretch? The first one is bad posture. Most of us sit all day. You find that you're working all day, you're on the computer, you're watching TV, and we don't sustain a good posture when we're using our phones. You notice that over time you start to have a rounded back and a forward head. That is a very significant sign of bad posture. So what can help us to correct that posture is stretching out your back muscles. You can develop back pain, specifically lower back pain. So this goes hand in hand with poor posture where you have a rounded back, but in this case we have lower back pain, and usually what also helps us, or what contributes to us having back pain, is having tight hamstrings and tight hip flexors. So those, if those two are tight, as well as the upper back as well, if the muscles are tight, you'll notice that the lower back will try to compensate, and eventually it develops pain. So to help reduce the pain, it is important to stretch those specific muscles, the leg muscles, as well as the back muscles. That helps to relieve pain. So most of the times you just focus on stretching the lower back, but forgetting about the hamstrings and the hip flexors, because the more they pull, the more they tighten, the more they pull, they make the lower back to compensate. It's the limited range. The third one is limited range of motion in the joints. This usually happens as we grow older and we don't regularly stretch, but it is way more common in people that are physically active and they don't like stretching after doing an exercise or activating the muscle with dynamic stretching before they start doing an exercise. What happens is there's this build up. So when you're exercising, the muscles are contracting and there's build up of lactic acid, because in as much as you're going to breathe in that oxygen, your muscles will not receive as much oxygen to use the clean type of energy. So it results to using a type of energy, or yes, a type of energy that produces lactic acid in the muscles. So when there's that buildup of lactic acid and it all sits just in there, you don't stretch it out for it to be flushed out, it sits in there and your muscles become tighter as you keep going forward. But the mistake that a lot of people do is trying to stretch the muscle whilst it's cold. That is wrong. This is why we never do stretching. We never do static stretching before doing a warm up or activating the muscle. This is why I want you to do dynamic stretching. If you do static stretching on a muscle that is hard, it's already hard. I mean, it's already hard. It's like trying to break spaghetti into two. It is the same thing, the same principle. The fourth one is muscle soreness. When we exercise, of course, there's buildup of lactic acid. I'm going to repeat this again. So if you don't stretch, your muscles will become sore. If an area had an injury, those muscles will become tense, or they'll become sore as a way to protect themselves. But over time, you can do stretching. It helps to just alleviate all of that pain. Stretching is very, very important. And the fifth one is being prone to injury. When you don't stretch, you become prone to injuries, especially muscle strains or muscle pulls. This happens because you're not activating the muscles as much as you should. Dynamic stretching in this case is going to be brilliant before starting a physical activity, because it helps to just bring blood flow, that fresh blood to your muscles, flowing and being nourished, being warmed up and being ready, just to decrease the tightness that are in the muscles, to prevent all of those injuries that would likely occur if you do not stretch, if you do not do dynamic stretching before doing an activity, a physical activity. Just always keep in mind that stretching keeps our muscles flexible, strong, and of course healthy, and this will help to just maintain the range of motion in our muscles, but without shortening the muscle and letting them becoming tight. That is very important. But of course, don't overstretch the muscles so that you avoid having muscle, tendon, or ligament damage when we overstretch it, because sometimes we overdo these things. But hey, this is what I had for you. Thank you so much for watching 5 minutes with Pepe. Make sure you share with your friends, family, and everybody that you know. I will see you next week. Just remember to drink more water and exercise and stretch as well every single time you have to. Bye.